Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Iris Fox, and I want to extend a warm welcome to the Rough Edges podcast. Rough Edges exists to provide mental health education as well as faith-based messages in order to inspire growth and foster healing. In this podcast, I will guide you through my faith and mental health journey to dispel the stigma surrounding mental illness and to create a voice for those who wish to discover more about these topics. My hope is that this podcast will not only shed light on mental health issues, but will also reveal the intersection between faith and mental illness in order to bring growth and healing in our communities. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rough Edges. We are in our fourth season, all about mental health and the media. And tonight, I have a very special guest here with me. Her name is Paula Sands. Paula is a licensed clinical psychologist who primarily works with college and graduate students. She has a passion for books of all kinds and mental health issues. She has gotten into Bookstagram in February of 2021 and has really enjoyed having the opportunity to share resources with the larger community. Thank you for joining me, Paula.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So, Paula, I want to get to know you a little bit better. So, what are 3 things that you absolutely cannot live without?
I love this question. Headphones, first and foremost, despite the fact that I'm not wearing them now. I love being able to block out things if needed. And to I listen to a lot of podcasts or audiobooks or music. So definitely headphones. Doesn't matter what kind. Any will do. A planner of some kind, preferably a paper planner, but I can survive on a Google Calendar or an Outlook calendar or the iCalendar, whatever it's called. If I don't write it down and I will forget it, I will not do it. It will not be done. And then sweatpants.
Yes.
I like a legging in theory, but I will always go for a sweatpant. The minute I'm home, it's sweatpants.
Oh, yeah. I resonate with all of those things, especially the sweatpants and the headphones. With me, it's I'm okay with using, Google Calendar and all that stuff. I need to get back into paper planners because I haven't really used one since, college. So,
I love
yeah.
planner currently, and I might not go back to any others, but I said that about other planners before, and that was not true, so we'll see.
All right. Well, thank you for that. That was great. So you are a licensed clinical psychologist. So what made you want to become a psychologist?
It was not the original plan. I went to college, wanted to be a pediatrician, so I was planning to go to med school, hit some of the tougher science classes like organic chemistry and realized I don't love this enough to keep doing it. Meanwhile, I had gone to therapy before. I was taking a developmental psych class because working with kids, I thought that would be a helpful overlap. Just found that I enjoyed my psych courses so much better. It made so much more sense and still allowed me to feel like I was going into a field that was going to be helpful, which was ultimately what I wanted. As a young kid, I wanted to be a teacher, so there was always some sort of working with groups of people. I thought they would all be kids. They're not. They're college students and grad students, which you can debate on whether or not that's kids or not. But as I sort of got deeper into the psych courses, I knew that I wanted to do that. And then I really wanted, I had sort of planned to go to med school, had planned to do a lot of post-undergrad education. So doc school just made sense to me. It's versatile. I can do a lot of different things with my degree. So I kind of fell into it a little bit, though I'd gone to therapy as a kid. And while I was in college, so I knew it existed. I sort of knew what it entailed, as much as one can from that side of the office. But yeah, so it was sort of a happenstance a little bit. And for anyone who's gone through any kind of schooling, it takes way longer usually than you ever want it to. And also doesn't come with a ton of extra time, or not even extra time. You have time. You just don't necessarily have the brain space to do anything else. So I was kind of getting back into reading as I was wrapping up with my dissertation. And I've always been interested and kind of been looked at self-help and like mental health books, even since like pre-college. I just liked learning things. That feels really nerdy. But I had and still have a lot of unread self-help books and a lot of read self-help books. And I wanted to talk about them and share about them. And I had sort of fallen into Bookstagram just looking for book recs on regular fiction books. And felt like I had the brain space to take on a project, and just kind of on a whim started it. It was also the pandemic, so it's not like I was doing a ton of else, and I was working in telehealth. And so I just read and started taking pictures and writing reviews, and then work gets busy, and turns out the extra space for a hobby waxes and wanes. So it's getting to like have an outlet and people who are interested in talking about the books as well, and a place to share the resources, because there are, the self-help books I think that people sort of make fun of and are not very good, but there's so many really good ones that can really resonate with people and be really helpful, and I want to find those and share those. Just like, much like most things, sort of moving away from a binary of like those without mental illness and those with mental illness as two separate categories, as opposed to like the many ways mental illness and mental health in its variety of forms shows up in between those two, and how to like present and talk about it in a way that feels real, but is also not like, just kind of humanizes the experience versus sort of making it like an other kind of experience. And
right.
Gotten better over time, but there's just so many nuances, and it's just so, they're just people with other things that go on that's experiencing things that to some extent we all have a little bit of, right? We all have a little bit of anxiety. If we didn't, you wouldn't get anything done. Like we all have moods that, we all don't feel one emotion for our entire lives, and all of these things. And some of the things might be more extreme or more uncomfortable to think of or look at, or you have less experience with, but there's ways to sit with and to be able to see your own experience shown and learn more, that I think is hard to do, probably, but definitely could be done better.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I hope
yeah. No, that was an excellent answer, because you're right. There are a lot of nuances to mental health that are not really portrayed in like media, because like you said, they romanticize or glamorize like, the experience, and they make it seem like it's otherworldly. Like, like people can have these things too. Like one example of that is Harley Quinn. I look at from like Suicide Squad and I'm just like, okay, they're trying to like romanticize this idea of like, okay, she's fun because she's crazy. And it's just like, that's not really an accurate depiction of like, mental health. So
just a terrible description of a therapist in the first place.
Yeah.
That's how she starts. She starts as a therapist or a psychiatrist, psychologist, doesn't really matter. I don't think they really care about the difference, but yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. But for sure, there's this sort of idea of like the crazy, whether this is a crazy fun or a crazy scary or a crazy violent, there's, no space for sort of the nuance of also like, that gets into the whole like calling women hysterical thing and crazy. That is possibly much longer than we ever have time for, but yeah, I think the nuance is just always overlooked.
Yeah, I agree. So you, we already discussed that you look into books that, deal with mental health. And so what 2 books, if you could choose 2 out of the abundance of books that you've discovered, what 2 books do you think portray mental health well, and why?
I found a nonfiction and a fiction. And because I tried self-help books, I think at least some of the ones I've read have done a really good job. But a nonfiction one that really sits with me, and I think a lot of people potentially have read this, would be the Know My Name by Chanel Miller. So she was the woman who was raped by Brock Turner at Stanford. And she wrote a book about her experience, and then everything of what's happened after. And her writing is incredible. I mean, she is so vulnerable in how she writes about it, and she's so truthful in her experience in the way that she talks about post-trauma and everything that she's dealt with, and doesn't try to to make it more than it is or less than it is. She's just very upfront with the pros and the cons and the ups and the downs and the everything that she went through. And I think it really does a good job of allowing someone a peek inside of what it's like to have that going on for you. And there's so many, you don't have to have had that experience to still sit with some of the mental health challenges that she dealt with, but the way she talks and writes about her experience is incredible, and it's so beautiful. But that for sure just still sits with me in the way that she expresses that. And then fiction wise, actually, I was like, I want to find a fiction book. Strangely hard. I couldn't remember a single thing that I've read, or what it was about, or what happened in it, or if there was mental health in any way. So I stared at my bookcase, and then the Charm Offensive, the romance book by Allison, I'm going to mess up her last name, Kokorun. I said that wrong, probably. I should have looked it up. But one of the main characters struggles with mental illness, and they both do, actually. It's been a while since I've read it, but they both struggle with different mental illnesses. And the way that she talks about it and writes about the way that they talk about it amongst each other and learn about it and process it and sort of what happens, I think is also very nuanced for a book that's pretty short, not short, but as I think does a good job of building that into the story, but not having it sort of take over the story in that way that until you fix your mental illness, whatever that means, you can't find love or whatever. I think she really does a good job of kind of putting them together. It was just a nice to see very human people with their own experiences, falling in love in a really cute Bachelor-esque book. It just brings me a lot of joy, and I liked the way that mental health was talked about. And then I added a third. The author, Emily Henry, I just like that she talks about therapy and mental health in her books. I don't think she it's not a main focus of it, but most of the characters have gone to therapy and sort of just briefly mention it at some point and talk a little bit about their experience and growth. And those 3 books that I've read by her, that sticks out to me. It's just a nice way that she kind of talks about it too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like that. It's just the human elements of it,
Yeah.
And it's just depicting them, as people. Because a lot of the times, especially in fiction, people with mental health issues are caricatures,
Yes.
And they're not really people. And I think my favorite one was the romance one.
Yeah.
Because it shows that you could get together with, other people who also, not just people who have mental illnesses, of course, but you could still find love and,
Yeah, and it
really
shows
good.
there's also some good friendship components and the way people support the characters. If you haven't read it, you should. It's really cute.
Yeah, I should.
Sitting a late Friday, I started it after I got home from work and just didn't go to bed till I finished it.
Wow.
10 out of 10 recommend.
That's awesome. The best books are the ones that you just can't put down.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for those. I'm definitely going to check out the romance fiction novel for sure.
Yeah.
Now that we've gotten into how they portray mental health really well, what are 2 books that transformed the way that you viewed mental health conditions, and why?
I like this one. So the most recent book that I read that just challenged me to think more deeply and differently was Losing Our Minds, The Challenge of Defining Mental Illness by Dr. Lucy Folks. But she talks about, it's in the title, but the challenge of sort of how do we define mental illness, and going back to the idea of that binary around it, you either do or you don't. And, the DSM really encourages that by, with the diagnostic criteria and everything, but really talking about how that's arbitrary. And it's useful in many ways. Insurance, for one, because having your therapy and treatment paid for by insurance is important. But makes it hard to find statistics about how people experience it, understand the different ways people can experience the same mental illness. Depression looks different. Can look a lot of different ways, but we use the same word. And talked a little bit about the, like, especially the college students, like younger generation and their mental health, touched on the pandemic and affecting that. And I just really liked the way that she wrote about it. She didn't shy away from the nuance again of it, and sort of think it's hard to want to write about that because it's so open to interpretation and people want like a clear answer to things, which like I get. I love a clear answer every once in a while, but that's just not how it works. I just really like that she writes about it, and it was like a nice challenge to sort of get myself a little bit out of the head, like how I work. And I'm lucky to work in a place where I don't have to bill insurance, so I don't have to like live by the diagnostic codes. But that's not the majority of providers. I really liked the way that it challenged that and sort of made me just like think more in deeply. So I really enjoyed that. In terms of like another one that has made me think about things differently, it's been so long since I think read one that's really been like, whoa, in that way for myself. But a couple that have really sat with me to be helpful for the people that I work with, or like friends, other people's. And one that I have actually had clients read, and we've talked about in therapy, that is been so long since I've read it, so incredibly validating. And for those who have never had that language put on their experience, is that like, whoa moment, is The Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents book by Dr. Lindsay Gibson.
Yes.
Incredible book. I will forever recommend this book to probably most people, because even if your parents aren't emotionally mature, you know someone who is. We all know someone who is. It might also be us occasionally, and that's okay. But it is such a validating book for people, and it's also so non-pathologizing. It's so humanizing to both the child and the parent, or whoever they might be in that dyad. But she just does such a wonderful job of not apologizing for the emotionally immature parent, but humanizing them, and she doesn't push that narrative of either like be the bigger person, good quotation marks going on that nobody can see, or the like cut them off option. Like she really talks about like there's so many ways in between and finding what works for you. Love it. I have her other two books. One that's like more about self-care and one that's more about boundaries that I will probably devour over winter break. But I will never not recommend this book because I think to so many it is such a like, oh my God, like this makes sense now. Like there's words for this experience. Other people have this experience. Like what is happening? And I just think it's incredible. And then have you read it? You were nodding.
Yes, I have.
It's so good.
It is.
My friends have read it. I'm like, my copy of it is getting passed around my office for my colleagues to read. Not that we have tons of, like, this will be a winter break book for them, but and then the other one that I really like and have in my office and talk about with clients is the Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before by Dr. Julie Smith.
I've seen that one.
I read it and was like, yes, these are the things that I have learned. There's always ones that I'm like, oh yeah, good reminder. But it is such a good like intro to mental health and like, what is it? And like sort of what's regular. Like your mood goes up and down. Sometimes we have a low mood for a while, and like just talks about these variety of topics. I don't have it. It's in my office, so I don't have it here to like flip through the thing, but just a very basic, like, what are these terms that we talk about when we talk about mental health? What is that? And what are sort of these basic things that ideally someone would have taught us in school as kids, but nobody did. So I love this also because it can be that same like, whoa, never thought of it that way, or like that's not the message my parents gave me about talking about my emotions, or whatever it may be. But it's such a good like intro book for people. So those are two, I think, that give people that experience, even if it wasn't necessarily my experience when I read them.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. It's, especially the adult children with the emotionally immature parents. Like I love my parents, but after reading that book, I was like, yeah, that explains so much about their behavior.
That's such the important piece of it is we can still love these people. We can still, but also still recognize that like maybe they did their best, but that still isn't necessarily what we needed or what fit best with us, what was healthiest. Right. Even if they maybe did better than their parents. And I think she does a good job of doing that like humanization piece of it. And to like, how do you have an adult relationship with your parents when you don't have to live in the home and have, that kind of piece of it. But yes, I think everyone probably benefits from reading that book.
Yeah, that is so true. Like, especially, like you said, like being an adult and having that relationship, because it's just the dynamic of the relationship that changes over time. Mm-hmm. And it's like, as you grow older, you get to see more and more of like certain patterns and certain generational things that have passed down that weren't dealt with. So yeah, you may have done better than my grandparents, but you still haven't really resolved like the issues or the lasting effects of your parents' behavior on you. And now you're passing it down to me and, so yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, until you can see the pattern, you can't change the pattern kind of thing too. So,
right.
And then being the pattern changer is a tough spot to be.
Yeah.
But tough.
Yeah, most definitely. So what are some ways that the media, and books included, of course, can improve on how it portrays mental health issues?
Ooh, another good one. I think like listening, like I think we're trying so hard to like talk more about it, and I think we're doing a good job and reducing the stigma and understanding people's experiences. And I think keep it on in that way. But I think adding into that is, what are the ways that we cope with this as it comes up? What is our definition of recovery? And how does that look different for different things and for different people? And also the nuance in recovery and what that word means, because there's also a binary around that. You're recovered or you're not recovered, and that's not how it works either. For most of the, a broken leg, maybe, yes, you either are or you aren't. But depression, not so much. I think, again, it's more nuance. It's more being able to feel like you can talk about your experience and have people listen and respect that without needing to like over or under talk about it, depending on who you're with. That makes sense. Like just nuance, always nuance. It's not how we want, we as humans want things to fit into boxes and make sense to us. We like our schemas, but that is just not like, the gray is just everywhere. And embracing the gray and learning to like think within the gray, and talk within the gray. I think, I don't know if that even makes sense, but just the after parts of it, of after we talk about it, how do we sit with it as friends? How do we talk about it as a community, as a society, as a country? How do we care, as opposed to it's your problem and you deal with it and come back to us when you're recovered, quote unquote, whatever that means.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, especially like you said, we want like everything to be black and white, and we never really think about, okay, there are a lot of gray areas, especially when it comes to mental health. And the thing about having a mental health condition is that, you never know at any given point. Like one day you could be all good. You could be good for weeks, and then, you just have one bad week, and then that offsets the good weeks that you had. And so it's just like, it's not a linear thing. It's not like, oh, I'm on my way to recovery and I'm just taking one path. It's like there are detours on that path. Like, Yeah, of course. And so, I just love what you said about, we love everything to be so like in clear cut boxes and everything. And it's just like, that's not how life is. And that's not how, mental illness is, because it's just your brain being sick, and then when you're sick, it's like, on the road to recovery, you have relapses sometimes, and it's not like when you get sick and get better, you can't get sick again. Like, that's not how it works. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
It's so much also like how we have resources to help support those who are sick. There's just so many things, but yeah, absolutely. Beautifully said.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, Paula, my last question for you would be, what advice or words of encouragement do you have for those who are struggling with mental health issues?
I hear this so many times. I think I couldn't even count or figure out the percentage of people who come in and say that they don't know how to talk to those around them, or they don't want to because they don't want to be a burden. I hear that word so many times from people, and just like sort of trying to let that idea go and to talk to those around you. If you're struggling, there's a high likelihood that someone around you is also struggling. Maybe not with the same thing, but in some way they are. And like shared struggles are lighter and easier. And also the number of times I hear someone the second time I see them be like, I've been feeling better since I talked about all of this. Nothing was done. I don't say anything magical. I don't have a quick fix to any of it. It's just sharing it and letting someone else hold a little bit of that pain is really, really helpful. And it feels good to be the person who helps and holds too. And of course, being mindful that you're not always the one holding or you're not always the one outletting. I don't know what the word is, but shared experiences and shared burdens are lighter for everyone. And that's, I think, that's what I want to, like, of course, please come to therapy, find providers, find resources. That is always important. Of course, I will never say it's not, but, your friends, your family, your community, there's people there who can sit and listen and want to sit and listen. Because all those people who come in and don't want to be a burden talk about how much they love supporting their friends. And the percentage is high enough that I know that those out in the world also want to support their friends. And so I think we're all sort of sitting in our own bubbles of not wanting to bother anyone, but wanting people to sort of bother us.
Yeah.
The logic does not logic. The math is not mathing on that one. So kind of letting yourself kind of sit with that for a minute and be like, okay, chances are my friend and I can share with each other. I think is such an important thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because it's just like the thin line between oversharing and then like taking on the burden a little too much, And the thing is, it's like you're never a burden to the people that love and care about you. But also, if you want, a helpful tip is just making sure that you ask like questions before you share. Like, maybe, hey, do you have like the time, or do you have like the emotional capacity to take this on right now? And then they'll tell you.
Yeah.
So you won't really feel like a burden. And the thing is, you don't want to like overshare, because nobody wants to be that person where it's like, yeah, they see you on the phone and it's like, oh, this person's calling. You know what I mean? Like,
that's also where friends come in and we're like, hey, maybe you need something more than a friend.
yes.
Right? And how do we challenge that? But I think part of that also comes from, we hold it inside for so long that then we sort of like dump it all.
Yeah.
And if we just let out a little bit and do it together, and check in with each other about it, it can be a lot more helpful.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Checking in with those around you on whether they're sort of ready to listen and be there is hugely important, just like they should check in with you. And together find other resources, of course, because our friends can't be our therapists. My therapist,
right?
My therapist, and but finding resources, whatever they may be, together is also easier to share the Googling struggles for a therapist in your area. I know that can also be a very real difficulty, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Paula, thank you so much for joining me today and for just, sharing your wisdom and experiences and also recommending some great books that I'm going to check out for sure. And guys, if you're listening, you should definitely check them out as well. And check out Paula's Instagram page. Guys, you won't regret it. It is amazing. It is on Instagram at Reading Psychologist. So that's all one word. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was incredibly fun. Such a good conversation. I really appreciate getting invited. This was wonderful. I'm excited to hear the whole season. And I've been listening to your back episodes. So I'm excited for all of your other guests and everything as well. So this has been incredible. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. And guys, tune in for more empowering episodes on Rough Edges. Thank you for listening to Rough Edges. This podcast is available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and more. For more updates on the Rough Edges podcast, please follow on Instagram at rough.edges.podcast. You can also visit the official podcast website at www.roughedgespodcast.com. If you have any questions or further suggestions for how this podcast can grow, please email at rough.edges.podcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening and have a wonderful day.